was like this one-on-one drill. My helmet sort of popped off my head a little bit and I landed on it when I hit the ground. Doctor comes in, he says, I have good news and I have bad news for you. The good news is you're not paralyzed, clearly. And I'm like, well, that's weird. Good news, but okay. Bad news is, looking back, it was that moment that changed everything. But in that moment, it was the worst moment in my life, right? That was when my identity just sort of got ripped out of me.
I wanted to ask about because you said you were a sports guy growing up.
Yeah, for sure.
So your intraspinous injury that you got.
Interspinous, you got it.
Yeah. I did my research.
Yeah. I love it.
Ligament damage. So you said that happened because during football?
Yeah, it was the first hitting practice sophomore year. First day.
In practice?
Yeah, it was first day of it's hilarious, right? It's sophomore year,
after
right?
all that hockey,
lacrosse, but this was coming into freshman year of high school, and so freshman and sophomore year was so different for me. Where it's like freshman year, I was just playing football the whole nines. After freshman year, going into that summer, you're training all summer for football. First day of hitting practice, where you're putting on your pads, throwing the helmets on, you're going on the field to practice with the team. That's when it happens. Literally day one, and for me, it was one of those moments where you're at practice. My helmet ended up being sort of too loose, where it was like this one-on-one drill. My helmet sort of popped off my head a little bit and I landed on it when I hit the ground.
Oh my God.
And it wasn't one of those injuries where I was rushed to the hospital in that day, that moment, but I woke up the next day where I could barely move my head 1 centimeter in either direction without excruciating pain. Ooh. Go to the doctor and do the x-rays. And I think this is just, I tell this story from my personal perspective, but I think all of us can relate to it, where you have this massive identity change and you might not recognize it in that moment or not. But I was 15 sitting in this room being naive about injuries of I'll be good in a couple weeks. My neck hurts very bad and I can't move, but I'll be good. It's the name of the game, injuries. Doctor comes in, he says, I have good news and I have bad news for you. The good news is you're not paralyzed, clearly. And I'm like, well, that's weird. Good news, but okay. Bad news is you can no longer play football due to the instability of your spine, and you have to be in a neck brace for up to 6 months, depending on how you recover. And then he's taking out the neck brace out of the bag, and I'm in disbelief, right? And it was like a snap, and looking back, it was that moment that changed everything. But in that moment, it was the worst moment in my life, right? Where I'm depressed, I'm angry at the world, I'm angry at my parents, I'm just in this neck brace, literally 18 hours a day, or no, 23 hours a day versus only when I'm showering or if I need to let my neck breathe for a bit. And that was when my identity just sort of got ripped out of me in terms of I identify as this athlete who's going to practice after school. That's where I spend my time. That's who I spend my time with. And then once you remove that, right, I'm no longer playing football. I'm no longer with in this team environment. Who am I? And I think whether that's you're selling your company or you're leaving a new job or you're going to a new job or you're starting a new project, I've always been a firm believer in, I kind of describe it as identity shifting, where it's anything that you truthfully, wholeheartedly commit to, you have to have so much self-belief and conviction in terms of, I am that person in conversation. I am that person, right? I'm someone that, I do my ice baths. I like running. I'm building a new software company in the podcasting space. I've had a podcast for 6 years. These are things that when I talk about, I commit to wholeheartedly. And I think that happens in every aspect of my life. And it kind of goes back to that moment of realizing, when you quote unquote have nothing or you have that something ripped away from you, you quickly have to scatter to fill your bucket of identity of who am I? What am I talking about? What do I stand by? And I think that, again, looking back, is when I learned that lesson in terms of how I apply it to my life today.
You read the book Atomic Habits?
I have, yeah.
Because you're basically explaining that.
I have, for sure.
That's great.
So, obviously it's kind of in an almost ironic way to say, it's that injury was the best thing that happened to you, probably.
For sure.
So...
and it's funny because someone asked me, what do you actually think you'd be doing if it wasn't for that? And I genuinely...
The NFL, baby.
Yeah, NFL or podcast,
either that, or he would have still in Virginia, probably doing some regular Joe Schmo stuff, probably.
Yeah, it's interesting. It really
I don't
is.
even know what people do in
I'm a
Virginia.
firm believer in
they drink.
everything they drink. Oh my god.
Hey, Virginia's kind of cool, actually.
Virginia's
I've been to
incredible.
Virginia. He's been to Virginia.
I've never been.
Yeah, you're a loser. Nobody's talking to you. Anyways.
Was, man.
Don't talk to my couch like this.
No, but I think it's really dope how you really did have like a positive reaction to the whole thing. I mean, probably not initially, right? You're talking about like
not at all.
the depressive phases you went through and whatnot. Now, just in general, would you say because of your upbringing, you were able to kind of like reflect on the whole thing that happened to you and then turn it into a positive thing? Or was that something that you had to learn the hard way?
It was definitely learning it the hard way.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I shouldn't even say I think. Like when I was in that moment, and I think it goes to other areas in my life where I don't think just you need to live in this positive state, right? Like if you were to talk to my friends and say, oh, like, is Casey a positive person? They would all say yes, sometimes overly positive and optimistic. But over the years, I've thought about that, and I think it's so important to embrace whatever it is you are feeling. If you're in pain physically or emotionally, if you're going through hardships, or if you have the successes, if you can embrace that and know that this moment is not going to last, let me truly feel this way, and then know that it will pass and it's okay. I think for me it was not having the foresight then, but feeling exactly how I needed to feel: depressed, pissed off, and really anticipating change. Yeah, like I wanted change. Did not want to feel like that, and therefore my actions just spoke. It started writing my script for me of like, how can I channel that into something more positive and productive? And I see these books right here, but it's like diving into this world of the unknown about business and entrepreneurship and building a brand and just what that entails. I just became obsessed with how can I, become better and learn new things. And I think that curious mentality is like what Larry King talked about in the interview that I did with him. He says just, you never learn anything while you're talking, and just embrace this idea of being a listener. And for me, that's been such a foundational element of my entire career, from the little micro moments of like you're in an Uber and you're listening to the driver take a quick phone call. It's like I'm always listening, and I think that goes back to like the first question about like how have I gone about my career. It's like it's one thing that yes, we're all listeners and we pay attention, but from networking events and podcasts like this, like genuinely embracing this idea of listening, and not just listening to get information, but to understand how other people show up in their life and how other people react to things and how other people communicate, to then take that and actually learn something from everything that's happening around you versus just showing up in the world and just portraying your own thoughts, I think is something that Larry King talked about in such a passionate way. So having
student mentality.
Yeah, like that lifelong. And I think that's when I was younger in terms of like my upbringing. I wasn't even aware that I was doing that. But then after, diving into personal development, I recognized things about myself that have then played such a instrumental role, and I think led into even podcasting, like wanting to find a channel to do that in a more professional setting.